All right. Hello, everybody. So hopefully this is recording because I've been doing this for a while, but I'm going to talk about the final project, the brand competitor analysis, and my topic was about video games, specifically PlayStation versus Nintendo. So let's get started. Okay, so first and foremost, I feel like we all know this, but I want to talk a little bit about the video game industry. That's something that's really popular right now as, we're growing up and we're pretty much more into technology as the decades come by. So it consists of a market pretty much of entertainment. We have game consoles, PCs, VCR, other gaming platforms such as mobile, and the list can go on. And two of the most well video game companies are Nintendo and Sony, specifically the PlayStation, I would say as well. So, interestingly enough, there's a bit of background in history from when I did the research, and it's actually really crazy to think about because Nintendo and Sony were actually business partners at one point. They were both well-renowned entertainment companies, and Sony specifically was trying to get into the video game industry, and Nintendo by then was already in that industry for at least a decade from when they started in the early 90s. So with that being said, they wanted to create a system, Nintendo and Sony hand in hand, where they would make a system that created a disc. And back then that was very revolutionary, and Nintendo was very nervous about it because it was a lot more pricey. So Nintendo ended up backing out from it, and with that being said, they kind of shot themselves in the foot, you could say, because that's when Sony decided to say, "I'm going to continue this project," and they made up their own system, which was the PlayStation 1. And it came out in 1994 and became a huge success, and it even outsold that generation with Nintendo, which at that time was the N64. So it was definitely something that is interesting to think about because who knows what would have happened if Nintendo and decided to, I guess you could say, stick to their deal. So my client company is actually Nintendo. So Nintendo is actually very old. It was founded in 1889 in Japan. And with that being said, they were first known as playing cards. And, I guess their roots was that they were always about entertainment and they just wanted like to be able to give people some back time. And from the decades that continued, Nintendo evolved from having just card games into toys, then to arcades, eventually landing onto systems. And with that being said, we know some of the classic Nintendo systems, such as the GameCube, the Wii, Nintendo Switch. Some of us have grown up on it, some of our parents have grown up on it. Currently, Nintendo has a huge success with the Nintendo Switch. It is a hybrid hardware. With that being said, that means that the Switch can be used at home or it could also be taken out and you could pretty much just play it on the go. Nintendo also has a strong relationship with their consumers because they are well known for their IPs. They came out with a movie, the Super Mario Bros. Movie. They're coming out with another movie, Super Mario Galaxy, next year in April. And they are very consistent when it comes to, their quality. And they take pride in trying to basically have the Nintendo seal of quality, which is something where Nintendo says that whatever games that they have a personal stake in, they want it to be actually played and, pretty much be appreciated at the end of the day. They're not trying to go for a cash grab, and that's why a lot of people, I believe, like Nintendo. And it's because they feel like Nintendo isn't really a company that is just trying to go for money. They're actually trying to give careness with their, consumer. Fans, however, funny enough, actually do feel like Nintendo sometimes can be very in a way interesting with their tactics. Nintendo is known for being quite trivial when it comes to the online services, and they still haven't really made a good online network compared to Sony or even other companies. And with that being said, they also are very, I guess you could say, in a way, pro against fans sometimes because Nintendo, as I've said before, they are very prideful in their work. But with that being said, if someone ever tries to, you know, use Nintendo, even like upload video games on YouTube without like Nintendo having a personal stake or having a personal relation with that YouTuber, Nintendo often is known for copyright claiming as well as, canceling projects or canceling conventions that they're not aware of, if that makes sense. So they kind of want to be in the know with everything, which is what kind of is suckish about them. So the competitor brand that we're also going to talk about is Sony. So with that being said, specifically, like I said, the PlayStation. So from here on out, I'm going to just mention the PlayStation. Sony or PlayStation was founded in 1946 as well in Japan, in Tokyo specifically, and they entered the gaming market in the early 90s with the PlayStation after, their failed business deal with Nintendo. Afterwards, Sony ended up becoming a big video game project, and at the end of the day, with the success of PS1, it continued and it came out with the PS2, PS3, and so on. PS2 and PS5 are actually they're actually both like the best-selling gaming systems of all time. So that's pretty much with any other gaming system. So they have good props. PS5 right now, that's the current system that the PlayStation has. They are actually one of the top selling current generation consoles. So with that being said, they are really strong right now in their field and they're a good competitor to Nintendo. So this is the I would say the hashtags that I use or text analysis that I saw. I was trying to use the words when I searched up the analytics. So I used Nintendo, Nintendo Switch, Nintendo Switch 2 because I wanted to, get a field of both the Switch and the Switch 2. For those who don't know, Nintendo actually recently came out with their new console, I believe in the summer in June, with the Nintendo Switch 2. So it's more of an upgrade of the Nintendo Switch pretty much, and it's pretty much supposed to be like the new generation. And we have Sony, so I try to put that in the left side and then the right side. And then here we have I guess you could say the generations of consoles. So you could see that with the PS1, it was the N64, PS2, GameCube, PS3, the Wii, which is what I had growing up, PS4, the Wii U slash Switch, and then PS5, which the Switch 2, which is still ongoing. So it's very interesting to see. Based on like, whoever you ask, I feel like personally, of course, the PS1 was definitely superior. PS2 was superior as well, as we just went over. It was one of the best-selling consoles in video game history. The Wii definitely won in that battle. The PS4, of course, won against the Wii U. And right now, we're just still seeing what's going on with the current generation. So it's interesting to see. So going with the analytics, we see here that Sony, which is right here, or PlayStation, I keep saying Sony. For some reason, it has a negative view, which is really interesting to see how, even though it is a big competitor and is well renowned, a lot of people aren't very happy with PlayStation. Now, when we look at Nintendo, they're a little bit more halfway. Of course, it is a little bit more on the negative side with the two, but in terms of positivity, Nintendo does take the cake when it comes to that. With emotions now, so oh, sorry. Regarding with emotions, I noted what was the largest emotion from the par chart that I saw. So with that being said, we could see that anger was the highest in PlayStation, which, it's almost a quarter, which is interesting to note. And with Nintendo, it's definitely sadness, which is about one-fifth. So that's also something to note. When we compare to Joy, I mean, Nintendo does take 12%, so that's at least a little over one-tenth compared to Sony or PlayStation, which is 6%. And then with demographics, I felt like that was interesting to know because, of course, the video game industry is, I guess, well known to be, a male-dominated field. But Nintendo does have a little bit more diversity when it comes with females, since they have a little bit over a quarter compared to Sony, which is a little less than one-fifth of females. So, with that being said, it is nice to see that there's more, I guess you could say, women playing Nintendo games. And I guess it could be like for a variety of reasons. I think it could be that a lot of people grew up with them as kids, as well as I guess PlayStation is well known to be more mature compared to Nintendo, which is known to be more family friendly or kiddish. And it's also well known for casual gamers as well. With PlayStation, it is more competitive. So those are things that we could know. And then with the word cloud, of course, we got some Black Friday since it just passed. With PlayStation, funny enough, I like how with both of them, you could see that the competitors are right here. So we got the PS5 right here under Nintendo, and then we got Nintendo under the PlayStation. So it is interesting to see how, even with the word search, like I guess the competitors, they still pop up. So it's like either way, they're still like in each other's, back window. So. The biggest, I guess you could say, would be the chance to win Nintendo, which is interesting, as well as Resident Evil, as well as the PS5. And then Metroid Prime 4 is a little bit there. I heard that that just recently come out, so that's probably why. So the results. So the areas that I noted that Nintendo is weaker is that they have a higher proportion of disappointed customers, which is sadness, even though they have I would say only 1/5. It's still something to know because that's still a good chunk of, consumers who aren't happy with the brand, which of course is concerning. And they also face criticism, like I've said before, with hardware limitations. Nintendo definitely doesn't look the prettiest compared to PlayStation, as well as, game delays, as well as online services that could definitely be fixed. And then where areas where the PlayStation is strong is, higher quality of hardware performances as well as being able to, you know, have a good competitive space compared to Nintendo, which is more family oriented. So with that being said, even though I did note that we didn't see the qualities in, the particular analytics, it's still something to be said because obviously there is a reason why PlayStation is Nintendo's competitor. And these are the analytics I know that I just went over. So, you guys can feel free to take a look at that. And I am pretty much done. So, with that being said, I would say that the conclusion with Nintendo is that, it is good on paper that right now they seem to have the upper field, but I do think that they definitely need to push themselves with online services as well as creating more of a competitive market if they want to surpass PlayStation 5 and then the PS6, if that's going to happen down the line. And I think that they're on the right foot, but they definitely need to like put more gas, if that makes sense. So that's what I would know. But thank you guys for listening, and I hope you guys have a great day and good luck with finals and take care. Happy holidays.